Hello, I'm Maria Titizian.
And I'm Rubina Margosian, and this is the Week in Review.
Every week, we bring you the stories shaping Armenia and the region.
From politics and policy to social issues and conflict, we break down the news and what it means for you.
This week in the news, tensions continue to escalate between the Armenian government and the church. Archbishop Bagrat Galstanyan, who led last year's opposition protests, has been detained on charges of attempting to overthrow the government. And National Security Service officers clash with supporters and clergy at the Holy See of Etchmiadzin while trying to detain another archbishop. These stories and more in our weekly roundup of the news. Tensions escalated in Etchmiadzin today as a major confrontation unfolded between Armenia's National Security Service and the Catholicosate. Masked NSS officers raided the Mother See in Etchmiadzin and the Shirak Diocese in Gyumri, attempting to detain Archbishop Mikhail Ajabayan, an outspoken critic of Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, on charges related to terrorism and an alleged plot to overthrow the government. As news of the raid spread, clergy and citizens gathered at the Holy See. The Catholicos himself came out to join the crowd, and it was initially agreed that Archbishop Ajabayan would leave with the NSS officers, accompanied by his lawyer. However, people gathered at the gates of the Mother See blocked their exit, preventing law enforcement from escorting the archbishop. Following a standoff that lasted several hours, the NSS withdrew from the premises. In a statement, the agency said it made the decision to pull back in order to avoid a potential escalation and to ensure public safety. The National Security Service called on all citizens to refrain from obstructing legal proceedings and urged the Archbishop not to evade law enforcement. According to the statement, the NSS continues to fulfill its duties under the law and warned that any obstruction to its operations would be subject to legal consequences. Meanwhile, Armenia's investigative committee also issued a statement detailing the charges. According to the agency, Archbishop Ajabayan is accused of publicly calling for the violent overthrow of the constitutional order and the usurpation of power using mass media and digital platforms. The investigative committee also announced that a separate criminal case has been launched into the obstruction of law enforcement activity during the attempted detention of Ajabayan. The committee warned that interfering with lawful actions of law enforcement can result in criminal liability under Armenian law and urged the public to refrain from any unlawful behavior. After the Holy See issued a statement saying that although Archbishop Mikhail Ajabayan was not properly notified, he would nevertheless travel to Yerevan to appear before the investigative committee. The Archbishop headed to Yerevan. First he walked, as his supporters had blocked the road to prevent him from arriving by car. Eventually, he continued the trip by car. Before setting out, Ajabayan addressed his supporters, saying he is ready to appear before the investigative committee, accompanied by his lawyer. He added that he is not afraid of anything and described the charges against him as completely fabricated and illegal. In its statement, the Holy See condemned the behavior exhibited by law enforcement at the spiritual center of the Armenian people, including the use of force against citizens, describing it as unacceptable and condemnable. The Mother See also urged the public not to succumb to provocations, to remain vigilant, and to continue their support through all lawful means. 2 days earlier, Armenian law enforcement detained Archbishop Bagrat Galstanyan on charges of attempting to overthrow the government. He faces accusations under criminal articles related to terrorism and the unlawful usurpation of power. 15 other members of Galstanyan's sacred movement have also been detained in connection with the case. As a reminder, last year, Galstanyan led a protest campaign against the demarcation of the Armenia-Azerbaijan border in Armenia's Davush region. The protest that began in Davush escalated to demonstrations in Yerevan, with demands expanding from stopping the border demarcation to calling for the resignation of Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. Galstanyan's campaign had largely faded out by early last fall. The investigative committee released audio recordings that allegedly capture Galstanyan and other movement members planning violent acts of disobedience. According to the authorities, the group has been preparing to seize power since November of 2024. Law enforcement officials say the operation was planned in detail, with a decision to abandon peaceful protest in favor of coordinated violent actions. Investigators claim the group intended to form between 200 and 250 strike groups, each composed of up to 25 members, mainly ex-military personnel and former police officers. These groups were to act independently, without knowledge of one another's assignments, to destabilize the country's infrastructure and security. The plan reportedly included gathering the public in front of the government building under the pretense of a peaceful protest. Meanwhile, the strike teams were to be deployed across the capital and other regions, executing tasks designed to cause chaos without joining the rally. Authorities say the alleged goals included widespread disruption, using explosives across the country, causing car crashes, sabotaging transport networks, disabling power and internet infrastructure, and carrying out attacks of arson. The group also allegedly intended to hinder security forces by blocking military exits and staging cyber attacks on government systems to paralyze operations. By January 2025, the group had reportedly recruited over 1,000 individuals. Investigators say they acquired maps of Yerevan, identified key infrastructure points, and procured thousands of explosives and projectile devices, along with tools like metal tire spikes meant to immobilize vehicles. During searches of more than 90 properties connected to the group, authorities say they uncovered firearms, ammunition, operational blueprints, lists of recruits, military uniforms, communication devices, drones, plant material resembling narcotics, and documents outlining the sequence and timing of the planned attacks. Among the seized materials was a written action plan, which also included names of individuals allegedly intended for top government posts following the planned power grab. A version of this so-called plan was circulated a day earlier by pro-government media and widely shared by members and officials of the ruling Civil Contract Party. The Mother See condemned the actions of law enforcement officers against Galstanyan and his supporters, including the charges against them. The Supreme Spiritual Council expressed serious doubts about the fairness of the legal process and denounced attempts to link these proceedings to the Armenian Apostolic Church. They described the situation as part of an ongoing anti-church campaign initiated by the authorities. Meanwhile, Pashinyan continued to write on social media that members of the church leadership who have broken the vow of celibacy do not have the right to speak about justice, nor do they have the moral authority to represent the Mother See. Pashinyan went further, calling on Catholicos Karakin II to leave his position voluntarily. Otherwise, the faithful members of the Armenian Apostolic Church will remove him in what he said would be a Christian manner. Throughout the week, Pashinyan and other ruling party members have continued to demand the Catholicos' removal, arguing that he holds his position illegitimately due to violating his vow of celibacy. In their official statements and public remarks, they have even stopped using his religious title, instead referring to him by his secular name. In other local news, Prime Minister Pashinyan announced this week that the government is ready to move forward with the nationalization of the electric networks of Armenia. During a cabinet meeting, Pashinyan said the state will begin the process of taking over the network's management with the goal of improving the company's efficiency. Legislative measures have already been prepared to support the initiative. Ultimately, the government says it wants to allow Armenian citizens to buy shares in ENA, turning the company into a publicly co-owned asset. Talks about the nationalization of the electric networks of Armenia resurfaced last week following the detention of the company's owner, Russian-Armenian businessman Samvel Karapetyan. He was arrested on charges of publicly calling for the usurpation of power. This week, Karapetyan's legal team announced they're preparing to take the case to the European Court of Human Rights. At the same time, they've decided to withdraw an earlier appeal against his pretrial detention. The decision came after the case was assigned to Judge Armen Danielyan of the Court of Appeals. A judge, the defense claims, has a long-standing reputation for bias and has been frequently recused in the past. According to Karapetyan's lawyer, the legal team has already filed a motion to formally withdraw the appeal and is moving ahead with the necessary steps for an application to the ECHR. Meanwhile, Russian authorities have accused Armenian tycoon and Member of Parliament Khachadur Sukyasyan of involvement in a high-profile diamond theft case. According to a statement released by Russia's Federal Security Service, the FSB, a company linked to Sukyasyan is alleged to have been involved in the systematic theft and smuggling of high-quality diamonds from the Russian state-owned company Alrosa. Russian law enforcement claims that several individuals were detained while attempting to steal diamonds worth approximately 1.7 million rubles. This amounts to about $21,000. The operation, reportedly organized by the Bagrat brothers, Armenian citizens currently wanted internationally for diamond smuggling, who allegedly used an Armenian-based company to receive the stolen goods. Russian officials specifically named ADM Diamonds, claiming it was the recipient of the smuggled diamonds, and identified Sukyasyan as its beneficiary. Both Sukyasyan and the company have strongly denied the accusations. Sukyasyan's spokesperson called the allegations baseless and politically motivated, framing them as part of a broader campaign of disinformation. ADM Diamonds also issued a statement rejecting any connection to the case or to Sukyasyan. The company emphasized that since 2022, its sole owner has been Ardak Bagrat, and that it has never sourced materials from Russia. ADM Diamonds claims all of its raw diamonds are legally imported from the UAE and Hong Kong, and stressed its commitment to legal and ethical business practices. The company went on to say that it has never cooperated with any political group or illegal organization, and intends to take legal action against the dissemination of what it described as fake news. On June 20, the leaders of Armenia and Turkey met in Istanbul for high-level talks. According to Pashinyan's office, the two discussed the ongoing process of normalizing relations between Armenia and Turkey, emphasizing the importance of maintaining constructive dialogue and achieving tangible results. They also touched on regional developments and explored possible avenues for bilateral cooperation. Prime Minister Pashinyan reaffirmed Armenia's commitment to promoting peace and stability in the region and reiterated his government's dedication to normalizing ties with neighboring countries. Both leaders expressed their readiness to continue direct communication and dialogue. They also exchanged views on the Armenia-Azerbaijan peace process as well as Armenia's Crossroads of Peace initiative. Meanwhile, the statement from the Turkish presidency provided even fewer details, only noting that the meeting took place and that both countries' foreign ministers were also in attendance. At its recent ministerial session in Istanbul, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the OIC, adopted the Istanbul Declaration, which echoed Azerbaijani narratives targeting Armenia. The declaration urged Armenia to remove what it called the remaining legal and political obstacles to a peace agreement and to stop undermining Azerbaijan's sovereignty and territorial integrity. It also expressed full solidarity with Azerbaijan's efforts to rebuild and demine what it described as liberated territories affected by Armenian aggression. The OSCE went further, expressing deep concern over what it called the systematic expulsion of hundreds of thousands of Azerbaijanis from, quote, present-day Armenia. It condemned what it described as the destruction of Islamic cultural heritage, reaffirmed the right of return for those displaced Azerbaijanis, and criticized Armenia for refusing to engage with organizations representing the so-called Western Azerbaijani community. It's worth noting that the OIC has 57 member states and presents itself as the collective voice of the Muslim world. While its members include close allies of Azerbaijan, many also maintain friendly ties with Armenia. Armenia's foreign ministry condemned the declaration, calling its language distorted and extremely one-sided. Yerevan pushed back against the use of the term Western Azerbaijan, calling it a veiled territorial claim. The ministry emphasized that Azerbaijanis left Soviet Armenia voluntarily during the final years of the USSR, in contrast to the violent expulsions of Armenians from Azerbaijan, including the recent exodus of over 115,000 people from Nagorno-Karabakh in 2023. It also criticized the OIC's resolution on cultural heritage, saying it ignored the destruction of Armenian monuments under Azerbaijani control and framed the issue in misleading religious terms. Armenia urged OIC member states to reject initiatives that undermine its sovereignty and jeopardize the fragile peace process. Azerbaijan's foreign ministry spokesperson dismissed Armenia's response as baseless and accused Armenia of trying to derail the peace process. He insisted that the OIC's resolutions, including the one affirming the right of return for Azerbaijanis, are grounded in historical fact and international law and not territorial claims. This week, a European Union delegation visited Armenia as part of ongoing talks on visa liberalization for Armenian citizens. Deputy Foreign Minister Vahan Galstanyan met with the delegation, which represents the European Commission's Directorate General for Migration and Home Affairs. The discussions focused on developing a visa liberalization action plan and strengthening cooperation on visa-related issues. EU representatives also shared insights from their meetings with Armenian government agencies, emphasizing reforms in areas such as document and data security, human rights, and the fight against organized crime, corruption, and financial crimes. Armenian Foreign Minister Arad Mirzoyan was in China on an official visit this week, where he met with his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi. The two ministers held talks on strengthening bilateral relations and expanding cooperation in a range of fields. The meeting agenda included trade and infrastructure, regional connectivity, and political dialogue. Both sides expressed satisfaction with the process made so far and reaffirmed their willingness to broaden their partnership. Discussions also touched on cooperation with international organizations, including the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and Armenia's role in expanding regional connectivity through its Crossroads of Peace initiative. Mirzoyan outlined Armenia's vision for peace in the South Caucasus and welcomed China's principled position on regional stability. After a 9-month vacancy, China finally appointed a new ambassador to Armenia in April. Between 2009 and 2022, China consistently ranked as Armenia's second-largest trade partner after Russia. However, over the past 2 years, it has been overtaken by the United Arab Emirates. In 2023, Chinese imports to Armenia stood at $1.7 billion. Armenia mainly imports mechanical appliances and machinery, electrical equipment, vehicles, and textiles, including clothing, footwear, and headgear from China. Armenian exports to China in 2023 totaled about $425 million, with more than 96% made up of copper and molybdenum ores and concentrates. And just as a note, while Armenia's neighbors, Georgia and Azerbaijan, have signed strategic partnership agreements with Beijing in the past 2 years, Armenia has moved in a different direction by signing a strategic partnership with Washington earlier this year. And this week, Armenia's economy minister Gevorg Baboyan traveled to Tbilisi to address the issue of Armenian trucks carrying alcoholic beverages being held at the Georgian border. Following negotiations with Georgian officials, Baboyan announced that 55 trucks loaded with Armenian brandy would be released from customs this week. An additional 72 trucks are expected to be cleared over the next week, followed by another 24. Since April, Armenian brandy producers have been raising concerns about delays and complications created by the Georgian side, including refusals to let shipments cross the border and demands for additional inspections. And as always, we talk about the articles we published this week. And actually, this week we launched our June issue of SALT, our lifestyle magazine, and it's called Under the Open Sky. The June issue explores how tradition and reinvention meets across culture, style, and taste. We look at the growing comeback of film photography through the lens of Yerevan's photo labs. We feature a visual story of open-air ballet performances in Tumanyan Park. We visit a restaurant called Hummus Kimchi, blends Jewish and Korean cuisines, and we talk to Syrian and Lebanese Armenian hairdressers who are raising the bar in Yerevan's beauty scene, plus a story about capturing the soul of Yerevan wine days. We publish a monthly issue of SALT, and you can go back and check out some of the really cool stories that we've written about. And also this week, we published the next installment of Itinerary. This is our cultural calendar that's curated by EVN Galstanyan. He's an art curator. And from Berlin's well-funded immersive art scene to Yerevan's under-resourced yet vibrant efforts, this installment not only presents a calendar of cultural events coming up, but imagines what could emerge if Armenia's artistic potential were fully supported and politically prioritized. Well, that's the kind of week it's been here in Armenia. Thank you for listening. Have a safe and peaceful weekend, and we'll be back again next week.